changes pretty quickly around us. There is a hospital where people take time for moments of care. With small yet powerful acts of kindness, they show a commitment to serving that goes beyond medicine, beyond technology. It could be in any hospital, but it's not. Because here, it's more than a job. OVMC and East Ohio Regional Hospital.
Well, yeah, is it okay if we come over to you?
Okay.
You can show us a couple
Yes.
things you bought?
An article about the history of OVGH, and this is the city hospital in the old East.
If someone said, what's OVMC? How would you explain this?
I would say an institution, a healthcare institution, but it expanded beyond that in many ways because it was more than that to the people who worked there. It was family. It was something that was important to make it work and to make it right for these people in this area. I'd explained it as, yes, it was a hospital, but not just a hospital. You know, it had a life, and a pretty dynamic life.
Near the beautiful Ohio, glorious to view, with her nurses gathered round her, faithful, tried, and true. OVGH stands forever as a beacon light, pointing out the way of service, shining day and night. On through ages may she never let her light grow dim, leading, serving, helping others, faithful to the end. Justice, love, unfailing mercy shown to everyone. Standards that are high and noble and surpassed by none. When we are here today, we look at Center Wheeling, we see demolition, we see raising of buildings, but it's always the land. And to understand the land, we go back to 1848 in this community. We have a direct line. In 1848, there was a hill in Center Wheeling, which was prime property. And in 1848, something happened which spurred action, and it was 6 sisters of the Visitation came into Wheeling to set up the Wheeling Female Academy. They were Catholic. The school would be Catholic. And so that same year, a group of prominent citizens got together and said, we need a Christian Protestant school for girls in Wheeling. $20,000 in 1848. It was 4 stories, 2 wings. It could serve up to 300 students. The first graduating class, 2 students. Okay, you think, how did they make it? It was tight. The Civil War hit. Everything went down. When they reopened it in 1865, they called it the Wheeling Female College to kind of make it look like a new school. I think this is a great letterhead, Wheeling Female College with the building. It's always good to have remnants of historical institutions. And the Ohio County Library has a whole collection of catalogs going almost back to the beginning from the Wheeling Female. Now this is the college, and that would have been after 1865. 1890 hits, and the president of the school quits, just quits. Now you have this 4-story building sitting on the hill in 1890. What are you going to do with it? Just so happened, a group, again, of prominent citizens had been talking about starting another hospital. They bought the building at auction, actually, for what was to be called the City Hospital. It opened in 1892. Of course, they made postcards of everything, but here's an old postcard of City Hospital. Of course, there was already a hospital in Wheeling Hospital, the first in the state of West Virginia. It was Catholic. You don't want to push too much the religious aspect, but I'm sure that it figured in. By 1912, they were doing quite well, and the building was getting old. And they thought, we need a new building. It says the old City Hospital has finally passed out of existence. And not a stick or stone of the old building remains. So that was probably kind of sad in 1912 to see the old building go down. Just like today, another raising on that property. They reopened it in 1914 and called it Ohio Valley General Hospital.
Hospital management is one of the most complex jobs that there is. Not only do you run a hotel with 3 meals a day and open 7 days a week and staffing, but also you have the intricacies of doctor-patient relationships, providing life-saving care, and the finances to make sure that the hospital continues on.
It was a fascinating place. The guy who was executive director was a man by the name of Fred Blair. He had started there with Stanley Turk, who was kind of the godfather of what OVGH was in its movement from 30s and through the 40s into the 50s. He had had long tenure there.
He was a very unique person, a visionary, but also a detailist. Representatives would come in to sell him all sorts of things and knew that he was a hard negotiator and only wanted a bargain. Interestingly enough, outside of Mr. Turk's office were a long row of chairs. And if you wanted to see Mr. Turk, you took a seat, and the chair that you were in, you were next in line. The paper boy would come. Next to him would be a doctor. Well, the paper boy would come to see him before the doctor, which was a unique way of making an appointment. But I would say the takeaway from Mr. Turk was that he had a vision for OVGH and the School of Nursing, and I tried to, and believe I did, carry on that tradition.
We have always in Wheeling had a strong medical presence, and I am talking really progressive, well-educated doctors, more so than the time called for. And we have at the OV the oldest nursing school in the state. Well, think about that. That meant we, before anybody else in West Virginia, had professionally trained nurses running around. Nobody else had this.
The nursing school was right there in the beginning, 1892, first graduates in 1894. So it was there from the very beginning.
We had extraordinary nursing staff. Those that had direct patient care were second to none. And that's always been the shining star that we had. And that long-term commitment and frankly love for the institution, and many of them were graduates that came out of our School of Nursing, and that whole relationship just worked so well.
The most difficult part of managing a hospital is recruiting nurses. I have to give credit, again, to Mr. Turk. He had the vision to start a School of Nursing, and of course, the graduating nurses were familiar with the procedures and rules of the hospital, and their first job would normally be there. So recruiting out of the School of Nursing had a major impact on the quality of care in the hospital.
At the time, you could be a nurse, you could be a teacher, you could be a secretary. That was it. for my generation. So I was, I don't know, 13, and I read Cherry Ames books. You probably have never heard of Cherry Ames books, but Cherry Ames books were a big thing back then because they were trying to recruit people into nursing, actually. And so they had this whole series of nursing books. Cherry Ames student nurse, Cherry Ames surgical nurse, Cherry Ames cruise nurse, which was to get people interested in nursing and show that nurses could do a lot of different things. And I went to my mom and I said, right then, I said, Mom, I want to be a nurse.
When I was in the dormitory, it was the old nursing buildings.
Oh, yes. Oh, gosh, you could only stay in the dorm. Nobody came from outside in the beginning.
My room was actually located on the 5th floor of the nurses' residence, right across from the nursery.
This is the entrance to the old nurses' residence, and the stairs, lots and lots of goodbye kisses were from that stairway.
I can remember the day my mom took me to the nurses' residence and dropped me off. She cried.
You had to wear a dress. You had to wear a uniform over to the hospital to have your meals. You weren't allowed to go past Elby's in shorts if you wanted to go uptown. So it was very strict. I thought, oh boy, I don't know if this was the best idea.
Of course, we had a curfew. You didn't go out in slacks or shorts, and you got to know your classmates really well. Of course, we're friends still. 65 years later? This was my roommate, and that was our dorm room.
Yeah, it was fun. We'd have our evenings together. We had, must-see Thursday. Night TV was a big thing, and we had an intercom box in our room, but phones on either end of the corridor. So if a phone call came into the front desk, the house mother, she would call our intercom, say that we had a call, and so you'd have to poke your head out the door and try to listen which end of the hallway, was the phone ringing, and go grab the phone.
I can't even tell you, I'm still very close with most of the people I went to nursing school with. We were all going through the same thing. We lived together and we worked together.
You had a new set of sisters when you came to that facility. Best friends for the rest of your life.
A well-rounded nurse has to know many things, and I knew that they would deal with patients of all kinds, and I had the classes with them before they went on the floor. Every student had a different personality, and every patient did, but you had to figure out, how can I use what I have to help that patient? I was not a nurse, you see, but I was looking at the practical side. I wanted to make sure I offered as many things as I could for them. I had classes in self-defense, and of course I'd made all my clothes and could sew, so we had sewing classes. I just thought there was a lot of home economics and other things that, regardless of whatever they did in life, they'd find some use for it. And it was learning to work with people. And surely if they couldn't do that, they weren't going to have a responsive patient, and if that patient wasn't responsive, the healing wasn't going to be as rapid as it should be. Apparently it worked because nobody told me to do it any other way.
In my time, again, it was very clinically focused, which I would be critical of today's nursing education in that I don't know that there's always enough clinical time.
Midway through our first semester, we were out on the patient care floors giving care to patients. So we started right out of the gate.
We'd get up and be on the floor working at 7 o'clock in the morning. 6:30, we'd have to be over there for a report, and we'd hear what happened during the night and how the patients were. And then we'd work until usually noon, maybe 1 o'clock. We had, chemistry and biology and anatomy and physiology. We had all that. But we had the time on the floor working with patients and physicians and other staff members. And it, I think, made a huge difference in what you learned and how you knew what nursing really was.
That was one of the advantages of that school. It was a 3-year program. You did not get off in the summer except for a couple weeks. So you went and worked in the hospital all day long, and that prepared you to go to a job and start right off.
I can remember there was a day I went to the OR. It was really bad weather. Staff didn't show up, and we were it. The student nurses were it. And the doctor came up and he said, look, we can do this. He said, I'll help you through it. And I'm like, okay. When we did it, we did a surgical procedure on a patient because why? It had to get done, and nobody else was there to do it but us.
This is the invoice for my entire 3 years of nursing school, and it came to a total of $343.62.
For all 3 years?
3 years, yes. This is the picture of our class. We had 61 who came into the school, and we graduated 52. This is when we graduated up at Scottish Rite. Then my girlfriend and I got an apartment on the corner of 14th and Wood, and we both worked, in fact, we both worked on the 5th floor. The 2 wards were overflow orthopedics, which I loved.
I was hired out of nursing school to work at OVMC, which was, really a gift at the time. I didn't have to move away, or I could stay here. I got married. We raised our family here, so that was wonderful.
I graduated in '75 and took the weekend off and started back in the emergency room on that Monday as a new graduate. Back then, there was a whole lot of male nurses. I was actually like maybe the 4th or 5th one in my class. In high school, in the Sunday paper, and it was in the Parade magazine, there was an article there on male nurses. Just right after I taught it, I thought, this is kind of made for me. So I'm reading all about that. And I know a lot of with the workforces, and that is, some industries died down, and there was availability for steel workers or coal miners and things to go back and get an education. I think a lot of people took that route and became a male nurse.
It was hard work, of course, but enjoyable, getting to use your new skills, to interact with people, and have that good feeling at the end of the day that hopefully that you had helped someone.
Mary was one of my instructors when I was in nursing school, and eventually I got to work alongside so many of who taught me, like Roseanne Lipniscus. She was one of my freshman instructors. I worked with her when she worked in quality care. Of course, I worked with Mary, worked with Kathy Robinson, and so it was just really neat to go from student to colleague. So that was just another unique experience I don't know that everybody gets to have.
We held our own, if not even better, because I think there was an effort always made by the directors of nursing to make sure people had the education they needed, could move forward and do things and keep up with what was happening.
At the Ohio Valley General Hospital, a multi-million-dollar expansion program has been completed. Wheeling Hospital is also expanding. The city is the medical hub of the upper Ohio River Valley.
It was a very unique medical complex. It had a very specialized group of physicians in the Wheeling Clinic that attracted top-notch physicians from over the United States. And of course, they practiced almost entirely at OV.
This is the founders of Wheeling Clinic, which OV was always very proud of their relationship with the Wheeling Clinic and our doctors.
There were several things that we had that were really extraordinary. A very fine group of physicians. Many of them were old school when I first came on. Actually, a lot of physicians that had seen service in World War II as medical officers.
It's funny because I'm the young kid starting then, but it was part of a nurturing process by the physicians and nurses in those days to develop together and work together.
I was primarily attracted to OV when I came because of the residency programs that were there at the time, so I could continue teaching, which I enjoyed. Primarily the residents who had finished med school somewhere and then sought out a training program to get their years of clinical education, and High Valley was one of the better community hospital residencies.
It was a wonderful experience. It was not that large of a program, so I got a lot of individual attention from phenomenal surgeons. Dr. Heseda, Dr. Voss, Dr. Hershey, Dr. Dickinson. I mean, there's a difference between an academic and a community surgeon, and I think you have a lot more involvement, you got a lot more sweat equity into your work if you live among the people you're trying to take care of. Even now, today, when I go to Kroger's or Respecs or any place, I get a lot of my consults in the aisles. The patient will come and say, "Hey doc, I got a hernia, yeah, I'll get you fixed."
We weren't known for just being doctors, nurses, and on and on. We were part of the community. And so no one was a stranger to anyone, whether you're a patient or working at the hospital.
A lot of times we would hire sons and daughters of employees that were already there, and never regretted that because I think the employees took so much pride in working there, and they wanted to have, frankly, their children have the same opportunity.
It always amazed me the number of siblings who worked at the hospital, husbands, wives who worked at the hospital, just how it was this big family.
I became head nurse on that department in beginning of '61 and had marvelous people working with me, and I always said that they kind of raised me too, along with being excellent nurses.
It was a family atmosphere because we did share each other's lives.
I think I have to blame it on the nurses because they were like parents and siblings, but they could be strict when they were standing up for their patients. Yeah, I'd blame it all on the nurses.
People that worked there were truly dedicated. It's incredible the amount of affection that the people that were there had for the institution and for their fellow employees.
I always looked forward to making rounds because of the people who I was going to see. To me, that was one of the best things about working at that hospital was the relationship and cooperation amongst everybody, physicians, nurses, therapists, administrators, housekeepers.
We became a team. That bonding with our peers can help the patient because they could see they were the center. It wasn't, oh, that's not my job. It was everybody's job. We cared for one patient at a time, providing the best quality care that we could.
At that time, there was also Peterson Place, which was, in effect, I would say, a nursing home or a long-term care facility.
Peterson started out as Peterson Home. It was literally the home of the Peterson family. It was a 51-bed domiciliary care. They provided care for patients that didn't have families available, just needed someone to care for them. It was actually given to the hospital by the B. Walker Peterson family. It stayed that way until about 1950s when the old home was torn down and built this facility. And it's a 176-bed facility that provides rehabilitation care, long-term care, and skilled care. Usually a lot of our referrals came from the hospital. If they no longer met acute care criteria or required rehab, maybe following a total hip or total knee or a stroke, we got the transfers here. We had a medical director, we had a full staff. At one point in time, we had over 250 employees, and that was all levels: PT, OT, speech, dietary, housekeeping, engineering. So yeah, we were a mini hospital of OB.
Many wheels and hard-working people, a combination that combined to build this, Wheeling as we know it today. From this industrial hub, the spokes reach out in all directions on the land, on the water, and in the air.
We were innovative as we could be for a hospital in a smaller town. I remember when we started doing dialysis. Dr. Lottis came back to be a nephrologist in this area, and he said, we're going to start a dialysis program. Dr. Noble, cardiac physician, he came and he was very passionate about OV, and he said, we're going to do some research studies on cardiac disease, and it was called the Gusto study. It was a national study about using thrombolytics in heart attacks early on. Again, it was innovative. It was something that was different.
I was 33 years old when I started my practice at the Wheeling Clinic, and I was told unofficially by a secretary of the American Society of Thoracic Surgeons that at that time I was the youngest board-certified thoracic surgeon. So I was in Wheeling, West Virginia.
I mean, there's a prime example of why Wheeling was kind of unique. Dr. Capel, Dr. Pollock, they set up a plastic surgery. So we've had patients from throughout the state, from basically the tri-state area, that were flown into here for them to reattach limbs. And again, you don't see that at a community level.
Oh my goodness. Dr. Capel is an icon. He and Dr. Pollock. I mean, I can remember those guys working for days. They would, like a baton, Dr. Capel would work until he couldn't work anymore, and then Dr. Phil Pollock would walk in, tap him on the shoulder. He would leave, then Phil would work until he couldn't. Then Capel would come back. Those guys were just, you can't, there's no words that can describe them.
We worked through the night that night and successfully replanted the arm, meaning it had blood supply and the nerves were hooked up, and Dr. Glass had the bone hooked up and the patient was doing all right. And so when we finished in early morning hours, sort of staggered out of the operating room, there was a lot of hubbub going on. The news people were banging on the doors of the place. It was like, oh my, what have we done? Our senior partner had finally taken a vacation, gone to California. He called and said, how are things going? I said, well, we're going pretty good, but I think we have some bad news. He said, what's that? I said, well, I think we've blown our cover. Because in those days, the only center doing replants of any significance was in Louisville, Kentucky.
Each time we were reviewed by any of these national groups, we got very good grades. Clinically, we thrived.
OVGH School of Nursing was known across the country.
When my nurses from my department went out, people know they're from OV. They can tell the difference.
Those nurses almost always went above and beyond to help the families through it, to help the patients through it. And you could tell there was a connection, and that connection was important.
Front page of Wheeling News Register, September 16, 1958. I made this little wooden saucer with casters on it and padded it for this little child in pediatrics that had a body cast on. So that was her mode of getting around.
And so you made that? You
Yes.
helped construct? No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Quality of nurses was just out of sight. I mean, it's just, you know, they really helped. They really tried to take care of the patients. It was just phenomenal.
In the very beginning when I'm first a student nurse, first of all, doctors were smoking in the nurses' station. Dr. Sauter, who was a cardiac doctor, smoking in the nurses' station. And when doctors would come in, the nurses who had graduated before us that were working there, they would get up. You'd give the doctor your seat, so he would have a place to sit. That changed as I grew into, my senior year and being a nurse. You didn't do that so much. They have their job and you have your job, and that's to take care of those patients.
There was an Excellence in Nursing Foundation, Friends of Nursing, and the only reason that I'm in that is because no one else could fit into that uniform.
The first 2 years I was on the hospital board, there was another woman there, and she was a very brilliant woman with financial figures. But after that, I was the only woman on the hospital board. And they were wonderful to me. I talked as much as I thought I should. I never felt that because I was a non-nurse, I was pushed out of anything. They dumped everything on me they could. No, it was all learning and it was great. When I was elected chairman of the board, I went to the CEO and said, the one thing I would like is a tour of every department of the hospital and what they do. I said, I'm going to learn. I don't want somebody to see me out on the street and say, what's this dumb blonde know about anything? So I wanted to go to the department with the people, but I thought this could be, maybe a half hour or an hour. It ended up being 60 hours. If the patient knew how many people were around them to make that operation successful, they'd be amazed.
At our hospital at OV, the volunteers and the auxiliary are part of the OV family. A lot of the auxiliary personnel were physicians' wives, community members who couldn't actually every week be at the hospital volunteering, but liked to raise funds for the hospital. And we would select an area of the hospital that we were raising money for, usually yearly. And we had many different fundraising activities.
Did you feel like you had pretty good community support throughout those years?
Oh, very much so. Yeah. Very much so, yes. I mean, we would have a lot of Wheeling businesses, High Valley businesses, Belmont County, because a lot of people came to OV. We're in an area where OV was a big part of a lot of people's lives.
As we grew and we became more specialized in the care that was offered by specialist physicians who came onto the staff, particularly through the Wheeling Clinic, I decided that we should be called a High Valley Medical Center since we were a teaching hospital.
Education was a focus of that institution from the bottom up. There was a commitment to education on every level, every level.
Respiratory therapy, nursing, radiology. I mean, there were all kind of student learners all the time at OV, and everybody just sort of adapted into that mode that we would always be teaching. We were just kind of teaching the next generation of healthcare providers.
Practical teaching at the bedside or in the operating room primarily, but also give lectures to nurses, interns, residents. Anybody get sit still and listen.
Worked in the emergency room for a couple of years, and then I had the opportunity to go to anesthesia school. So we had a nurse anesthetist program was split between Wheeling Hospital and OV. I mean, we had surgical residents, medical residents, OBGYN, pathology, radiology. We had all the different subspecialties. So the opportunity to just branch out and learn, everything was right there at OV.
And for a while, it seemed like OVMC would have a bright future.
As I first started working there, that's when the current West building was being built. So I got to be involved with the first cases. We went from the old building to the new building. And back then, it was a state-of-the-art building. Our ORs were just unbelievable. The ICU was ultra-modern. Our MSTAR unit, the emergency room, just had the best of everything back then. Like now you look at a community hospital, they transfer everything to WVU, Pittsburgh, Morgantown, I think. But at OV, we had all that. It was like a small university hospital, but it was still a community hospital. Everybody knew each other, and all the departments. We were always like, it was a huge family, but given that quality of care at almost like a university level.
It's strange because we had the uniqueness about a new facility in 1980, the West Building being completed, but it was also a time that we had a major layoff.
This one is when the new West Tower was dedicated in April of '80.
That's when this whole question with the health plan came up, which I think was pivotal. We as an institution were asked to, we could participate with funding for the establishment of the health plan. So that was established, and a year or two went by, and it was having real financial difficulty. The federal government gave us an option. They would pay you off if we would disassociate with the health plan. And the board came to the conclusion that the best thing to do would be take the money from the government and run, because the sense was it wouldn't survive. At that time, Fred was not a full member of the board, but he was the executive director. And he was very adamant about, he thought that was a mistake, but he just simply was overridden, and the board made the decision that it did. In the 41 years that I was there, that was the most significant mistake we made, because frankly, Sam Nazaro, administrator of Wheeling Hospital, stepped in and he picked up that business.
I remember going to a meeting, it was an administrative meeting with all the department heads, and Dr. Hudnall and I were standing there, and that was when Wheeling Hospital got an exclusive agreement with the health plan. That, and we're all out there and we're all kind of devastated, and we said to our administrator, how's that going to affect us? And he said, oh, don't worry about it. And I always remember him waving and said, don't worry about it. And we said, but sir, our surgical volume, which I was more familiar with than anything, you just saw that decline coming.
For a long time, there was a lot of effort into trying to get the certificate of need for heart surgery at OVMC. But the backstory is, everybody knows, OV didn't end up with it, Wheeling Hospital did, and I think that's when OVMC really started their downward track.
So we ended up with this major layoff, the biggest one we had. It was 400 and some people, and I talked to every individual. I wanted to make sure that going over, a standardized process, and talk to them about that and why it was being done and so forth. And it was very, very difficult because a lot of these people I knew, and they were outstanding employees, to the point that I really had trouble with it. Towards the end of that time, I just felt physically and mentally exhausted.
Was that a temporary layoff, or was that truly downsizing?
That was downsizing. Yeah, it was downsizing. Yeah, refocusing the institution on kind of a whole new direction.
Nursing education for a long time had been hospital-based, but there was always this effort to push towards degree programs. We need a degree. We need to have a degree. And, when you look at how physicians start out, they don't start out in a program that is in 3 years in a hospital. They go to college, they get a degree.
And the nursing service at the time, we had a diploma program producing wonderful RNs, but the focus was looking towards going to all BSN, Bachelor of Science of Nursing degree RNs, and eliminating the School of Nursing, closing it down.
My first year, there were 3 floors of students. My second year, then there were only 2 floors of students, and our last year, it was just us. So, again, we just watched, everything sort of fade away. The farther we got into our education, the fewer people who were around us. That was hard, not only for us, but I imagine it was very hard for the instructors as well, knowing that once they finished teaching our class, they had to move on to something else. And I really have to give them credit because they all stayed. It was really a credit to them and their dedication to nursing education.
All the faculty members and even all the students really believed in it and believed it was the best way to learn. Because again, I'll go back and over again, the clinical focus was so important. I learned so much by being there, seeing it, doing it, as a student, not as a nurse, as a student, I could see, oh, look, this patient's blood pressure's dropping, their heart rate's going up, their respiratory rate's going up, something's happening. Learning that way, seeing, I would never forget that. And I never did. You know that then, and it becomes a part of you. One of the things that we did was and the Alumni Association was great to help with this, we were able to pull stuff together and have stuff that would help to document the history of the school and kind of keep it. And so we did put up a display with old uniforms. We had the original first uniform, from 1892, clear through all the uniform changes. We got as much as we could together and made that display and then kept some good records. So part of that, I think, was a little bit cathartic for me to work through that and say, well, I'm at least saving this. We can at least still have this and remember.
And of course, that put in there that who never let their light grow dim.
Ever since this has all been going on and Betty Jo and I have been doing some of this work, people, I'll say, oh, I'm working on the OV. Oh, my mother worked there. Oh, I was born there. My children were born there. Oh, they all have a connection. Connection, so important.
I'm sure most people will tell you the same thing. The best thing that didn't change at High Valley was the nursing care.
There's a nursing shortage, and at least OVMC with their nursing school could help fill that shortage. And when that closed, there was a big problem.
That long-term commitment and frankly, love for the institution, and that was a major blow when the whole thing closed down, and that took place.
There's a quote from Florence Nightingale: "Nursing is an art and a science," and I think that school embodied that for us as educators, as nurses, as students.
At OVMC, you'll find innovative treatment, expert bedside physicians 24 hours a day, and nationally recognized critical care nurses. Choose Ohio Valley Medical Center, part of the OVMC and East Ohio Regional Hospital family, where caring is a way of life.
From that point, then ultimately, we had Ohio Valley Health Services and Education Corporation. That included East Ohio Regional Hospital and Barnesville Hospital. Came in and we formed a corporation with those three institutions. Later on, Barnesville decided to disconnect and went back into their original freestanding small town hospital system. And that was interesting because the whole idea was to try to incorporate same policies and procedures for both OVMC, including Peterson and East Ohio Regional.
I worked at Westbanco, and because of the business relationship that Westbanco had with the hospital, I had been on the board at OVMC for probably 20 years, and then I became the chair of OVGH as we were winding down the corporation.
There was a shift from trying to do things by hand, billing and patient care, and going into the digital side of things. And I think our first attempts at that, at least the Wheeling Clinic, didn't go well.
That was probably the hardest thing, especially those doctors we worked with back then. They were more hands-on. I remember an anesthesiologist I worked with, he said, shut the monitor off, look at your patient. He said, he's going to tell you as much as that monitor and stuff. But they were more the hands-on, but then everything went to technology, and it hasn't stopped since.
You can lose your focus, because there's stuff going on, and particularly in critical care. We could get, you got monitors, and you got ventilators, and you got, all this equipment, and it's easy to just rely on that. But you had to always stay focused on the patients, and I always tried to give that that focus to people, understand, look at them first, because the patients are the center of it for me and for, most nursing staff. That's where it starts, is the patient, and then you kind of go from there with what do we need to do to help them.
You go through the hospital, and I always introduce myself, and I tell them, I'm not telling you what my position is because I want you to pat me on the back. I'm telling you because I want to say thank you to you. And 30, 40 years, and they loved it. They absolutely loved it.
Clinically, I can't say how good OVMC was. I mean, we were always striving to provide the best care we could. The other aspects of care, which involve money and keeping the doors open, just crumbled around us.
Cutbacks, closure of residency programs, which wasn't the fault of anybody locally.
A lot of the floors I worked on closed as they were downsizing.
I started nursing school in 1985, and from that first moment, there were always these rumblings of, oh, OV's gonna close, it's gonna close. We were gonna close for 30 years.
That went on for years, really, but it never seemed like it was going to be a reality. We had to do what we did for our community. And there were a handful of us who were on the executive committee that, first of all, importantly, is that our purpose was not self-serving at all. It was to hopefully provide options for healthcare for the community, keep our longtime employees employed, as well as having as many expert medical people as we possibly could.
I'm just a surgeon, so all these legal, political things are way out of my realm, but it was a business beyond imagination, and things were taking place in back rooms and in different offices that none of us would ever know about. But the final, I guess the results of all that was that OV just continued to have problems financially.
Oh, Wheeling can't support 2 hospitals and one of them has to close. And I can remember one of the administrators at one point telling me, it's hard to kill a hospital. And I really took that to heart.
We had to find someone to buy the hospital. We could not survive without having somebody else come in and take over the corporation. And we were heartbroken because we had only so many decisions we could make.
I think when it went away from local people with a local interest and a local investment, and I don't mean monetary, I mean just their family. I think when it went away from that is when the community started to lose it, started to lose the hospital. So.
And especially when they decided with all these Stark laws, anti-kickback laws and everything else, it was hard to figure out. And again, I'm just a surgeon, so I don't know. In fact, I've been told you're not a lawyer, so you don't know, and you're exactly right. But all these other things would always be pushing their way in between you and the patient.
That was one of the hardest things because we're all there for the quality of care. I mean, at OV, we had the best equipment, we had the best supplies. But then when reimbursement changed, it had to go from that. Not that I don't think the quality of care went anything, but again, it became a business model.
I mean, it was hard to do anything in there without it going through compliance and lawyers in Washington, D.C. and everything else. But it just made it impossible for us to do our job.
You know, if you go into a health system and it's already like that, that's one thing. That culture is already established and it's already there. But when you go from this hometown community hospital with hometown community people, and then that pendulum swings so far the other way, it is really a visible, palpable change.
Everything's contracted out. There's travel nurses. We were just talking to the assistant DON here, and there's 17 traveler nurses in the facility.
Surgeons we have here live in Tennessee, live in who knows where. They come in, they do their week shift, and then they're gone, and then, I don't know, it's very upsetting.
You know, people say, well, it's all corporate medicine. Well, it shouldn't be like that, in my opinion. It should all be about the patient. Yes, I know you have to make money, but we've lost some very important values in the way we're delivering health care now. So I have to hold on to those memories.
The part that I think is most sad is that the way that medicine was practiced at the OVMC no longer exists today, primarily because the practice of medicine is a corporate style of medicine. So the personal aspects of it are not there. You don't have nurses, you don't have physicians who are part of the community. So it's just, that's what's lost. And that's what the OVMC was so special.
Our other top story tonight, people say they never would think this day would come, but tonight at 11:59 p.m., Electo says they will, quote, suspend acute and emergency services at OVMC. Today, reactions range from sad to angry, as officials say they were working feverishly behind the scenes to save the hospital. Local fire and EMS squads have told 7 News they plan to gather at the hospital just before midnight to give the employees a ceremonial send-off.
The fate of the shuttered Ohio Valley Medical Center, for now, seems to be in the hands of the Wheeling City Council.
All the lands and the buildings of the property are being considered for the acquisition. It's all 700,000 square feet plus an 800-space parking garage.
The former OVMC building will be torn down and a state-of-the-art facility is being designed to be put in its place. The city, county, and WVU Medicine are all excited for what this means for patients.
Demolition continues on the Ohio Valley Medical Center as a crane and several construction vehicles can be spotted near the remnants of the building. Plans are on track to knock down the nurse's residence in the next 2 weeks.
I think once they started to see the buildings come down, it became real to people. You know, this building is just gone. What does that mean? Does that mean whatever I did was not worth anything? Didn't I make a difference? You gotta give people something to say, no, you made a difference.
When the buildings started to go down, I, like the rest of the community, mourned the loss of that great institution. Sam Nazaro called one day and he said, we can't let the history of Wheeling's OVMC be forgotten. He said, we need to do something. Sam was a former administrator of Wheeling Hospital, but he saw that the story of the OVMC needed to be preserved. So we talked about it. We knew Jim Stoltz was a key. We knew Mary McKinley was a key. So he and we started talking to people. I called Mary and asked if she would be a part of putting together a group. Well, of course, she was all in.
To a stranger, it's just a group of old buildings slated for demolition. But for generations of employees, the Ohio Valley Medical Center holds parts of history that should be preserved.
Catherine, the Friends of OVMC meet every week at the Ohio County Public Library. They're organizing archives and items that tell the 129-year story of the hospital. They are nurses, historians, and administrators. The nursing school was the first in West Virginia.
We are so blessed as a community, and we dare not take it for granted. We must remember, history is remembering.
The fine employees we had for so many years really were the heart and soul of the institution. And that's why this project is so exciting, because it helps to preserve a sense of the care.
Care, they say, is what made OVMC beloved, respected, and remembered.
I think the contribution, again, that it made to this valley is almost immeasurable.
I think preservation of physical artifacts puts you in direct connection. When you touch that, you touch the physical life of an institution.
The OVGH, OVMC Preservation Project is a project that we put together that basically centered around two goals. One, to validate and to verify that the institution and the people who work there made a difference. And to also then, secondly, document the history and preserve the history of that institution. We have a great dynamic in the group because we have representatives from the hospital, people who work there, went to school there. And then we have some people from the community. We have excellent support from the library, former administrator of the hospital, former administrator of one of the competing hospitals, Wheeling Hospital. So it's an interesting dynamic, but all the people have the same kind of passion to have the place recognized for the difference that it made. The library is super great. I will always compliment the library because they're letting us keep that stuff there, first of all, but they're going to take all the Times capsule stuff and put it out because not everybody got to go to the event and they want to see it in real life. It's very moving to me to be there. I didn't get much warning the first time. It was literally, they're getting the 1980 capsule out. Can you come now? I'm like, okay. And then the 1912, they called me at 10 o'clock in the morning and said, be there at 1. I'm like, okay. So we did and got to be there. Betty Jo got to be there for that one. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Becca, how are you?
This is pretty exciting stuff.
Hi, I'm Betty Jo.
Thank you.
I'm so excited.
I am
You wanted to keep going yesterday.
Well, of course I did.
I know you did.
I was concerned, as I think Betty Jo was too, maybe these things aren't in good shape. The one from the 1980s had been in water. Oh my gosh. Fingers crossed. Oh.
It's intact, Mary.
It's still intact. It's wet, but it's intact. Woo. We knew, well, if we have to open it up, it's better to open it privately, and then we can show everybody later on.
That must be a listing of things, you know?
It is.
Oh, it smells terrible.
This time
Oh,
capsule
that's
was
soggy.
prepared by the staff of the Development Office on Friday, March 28, 1980, with everyone's signatures. Heim, Bell, Gilson, and Maisel.
A nursing cap. Oh, I bet that's a pin right there, one of our pins.
I bet it is.
The pin. This is an important thing. You know, the School of Nursing, each School of Nursing had their own pin. Each School of Nursing had their own cap. People have pretty much given up on caps. Caps, nobody wears caps much anymore. I mean, they do for graduations and that kind of stuff, but they don't for working every day. I remember getting my cap and my hair ripped off because, you know, you're dealing with IVs that are hanging tubing and you get your hat caught or whatever. So I understand not wearing a cap, but the pin didn't change from 1890. And the white cross, which is the Maltese cross, which is in the middle of it, is for purity. It means a lot. People, when they see this pin, everybody's, oh, you graduated from OV. That's a nursing.
There's a service pin, the LPN pin, and the RN pin.
So that's the way we did it, and I'm really glad we did it that way because we were able to get the things that were wet dried out a good bit. And the 1912 was similarly damaged. There was a little bit of dampness to them that had been in there or whatever and gotten in there.
Yep.
Ready? We're ready.
It has a very expansive history, and it's great that we've been able to be a part of that. We were looking at pictures, we're looking at documents, we've got board minutes, we've got just the information that is there. and will always be there thanks to the Ohio County Public Library archive system. It's great to be able to have that and know it's safe. It's safe. Was amazing to me, and I will remember this forever now, standing up at the beginning of the ceremonial opening when we were in St. Matthew's Church, and I looked around that room and I saw all those people. Good for my heart, because I know they felt a connection and they wanted to say this place mattered, and I mattered, and what I did mattered.
I really came to honor my great-grandfather, Dr. Jacob Schwinn, who was one of the first physicians to work in the hospital in 1912.
Well, I graduated from Ohio Valley General Hospital School of Nursing back in 1978 and worked at the facility until it closed. So I was there about 41 years. It's my life, you know. I grew up there. My family, you know, was all born there and just, you know, spent a lot of time there. And it's just wonderful to come back today to see not only the cornerstones, but to just see friends and people that I haven't seen for a long time. So this has been wonderful.
That closure was just so rapid. Some people were told not to come back tomorrow. There were personal items still left in desks.
They never had a chance to really say goodbye to the place or goodbye to each other. That was the first time some of these people had gotten to see each other again. You know, that's painful when you have people that you feel close to because you've worked with them, because of the things you've been through together, and to not have had a good way to say goodbye.
The OV was like my home away from home when I trained there. The radiology group gets together. We've been getting together for probably over 2 years, once a month. We had lunch together. Just lots of fond memories of a lot of really good people.
People who work there have a connection. And so it's kind of fun because they do say, oh, let's get together for dinner. I know the OR staff, for example. I know the radiology folks get together. They do a similar kind of thing. But the bigger thing is that the Friends of OVMC, anybody who worked at the hospital can belong and come to the dinner.
I have sent out over 300 letters, and so far I have 71 reservations for the dinner in April, and I think I'll be getting quite a few more.
And let me say, one of my biggest honors that I've received was just last year. I was made an honorary alumnus of the OVGH School of Nursing. So it was such a cool thing. I'm very proud of that.
It's so delightful that people do have such an interest and such a good feeling of something that they were a part of, like OV.
It was a great place. We loved it. I worked there my whole life. My whole career, I should say, you know, and everything.
What did you do there?
I was a nurse in the operating room for 43 years.
Here's my career. I started in the kitchen at Peterson, then I went to Central Supply, and then I became a nurse, and then I went to anesthesia school and became a nurse anesthetist.
Incredible.
And OV helped me do all that.
Mm-hmm.
I see you guys got your bricks already.
We got our bricks. Yes, yes.
The bricks.
Bricks.
The bricks. I need a box of bricks. I want 10 bricks. So we are still delivering bricks. If you go to my car right now, I have bricks in my car.
I have bricks in my car.
And people are still asking for bricks. And you know, I think, are they building a house? You know, what are they doing? Well, no, my mom worked there. I want to put it on her grave. You know, I want to do this with it. My 3 kids were born there. I want to keep that. So, I mean, it's sort of a tangible, something to hold on to instead of this pie in the sky idea of, yeah, it was a great place, it was a wonderful hospital, but I don't have anything to hold on to.
God, we've been through so much, Beja. It's hard to even think about.
You know what? I know. I think about that.
Yeah.
Good and bad.
Oh, gosh.
It's interesting, in the alma mater for the School of Nursing, we talk about the OVGH letters being the beacon light.
This is when it says that the icon shines again, the OVGH, that we're trying to preserve the letters.
Saving the letters, that's a big thing. And they're iconic, they represent the hospital, and hopefully we're going to do a good job of respectfully having them in a permanent home now.
Special thanks from Betty Jo and myself, and actually the whole committee, because we really need to recognize one committee member who actually started the process of saying that this institution and its employees deserve to have recognition for the difference that they made. And that is Sam Mazzara.
So again, you have this huge campus of all these buildings, what to do with them. Just so happened that Wheeling Hospital, WVU Medicine, was looking to build a cancer center for the region in Wheeling.
Wheeling and the area, actually the Northern Panhandle, is becoming a very instrumental component of the WVU Cancer Institute. And the Cancer Institute is actually a network of hospitals across the state and the region with the intention that patients have the ability to get as much of their coordinated care as close to their home and their communities as possible. What's really important is us paying our respects to what came before. People went there for healing. We have every intention of it being the exact same moving forward. And we always learn from the past, and we always have to understand what a place means. So a place can be a place for bricks and mortar, but it can be a place for something far greater than that. And so we want to make sure that we honor that, but we also move forward in that location with a new facility.
This land is to be repurposed in the legacy of caring and service that started in a direct line from 1848. So today we still have the land serving the people of this valley.
It's sad that the buildings are gone and it's going to be different and all that, but it's still focusing on the health and better health for the people in this area. And I think, that's important. And I just hope they build on that legacy, because it's big shoes to fill, if you ask my opinion.
And there's a great deal of sadness about the buildings going down. But I keep saying, to me, the buildings aren't that important. The thing that was so important, it wasn't the buildings that made the OVMC such a great hospital, but it was the people who were involved. And so I know that so many who work there have the same sense of pride that I do, that are a part of it.
So I saw an awful lot of people just live there day in and day out trying to take care of patients, and their hearts were in it. I think their hearts were in it. I know their hearts were in it.
It's so easy to get caught up in the minutia because that's where a lot of the focus is nowadays. You have to document this because this is how we get paid. And not that that's not important, because it is important, and I understand that. Hospitals are a business. But I would say remember why you chose this in the first place. It's about the patient.
The patients had always said they came to OV because they were cared for and loved. It wasn't just you had to be here and be healed and get out the door. That was the feeling and the training in the complete staff. I felt that way. I'm not trying to give you a nice speech that will make a good presentation, but I really felt that way.
If there was an ideal way that you would want the OV to be remembered, how would you want that?
Probably a place where we gave really good care to really good people.
I want it to be remembered for the impact that it had. It had a huge impact on the healthcare for this area and for employees, for people. People had a job. 1,500 people were working there. So it wasn't just, a hospital, or it wasn't just, it was more than that. And I want people to see that. I want it to be remembered for that. Yeah.
We ask all alumni and friends of the OVGH School of Nursing to please stand if you are able as we sing all the bottom, which is on the back of the program. Living
be visionary. Try to anticipate what's coming in the health field and particularly in the hospitals. But you know what? Patients will say, oh, they were so nice to me and the food was good. That's how patients judge a hospital, by whether or not they got a good meal.
Right.
Right. Okay, we finished?
Yep. Thank you very much.
I want to thank the team for allowing me to conduct this interview.
Well, we thank you for taking your time to give us your insights. It was great.
All right. Goodbye then.
Bye. Thank you, friend.